Somebody yesterday had tweeted, by the way, what an amazing rally. Who here was part of the rally, the Cubs rally yesterday? So can you believe it's the seventh largest accumulation of people in the history of mankind? That's pretty wild. And so the guy said, I'm here with 5 million of my closest friends. So by design, what I've asked Salman for is an intimate fireside conversation. There's no fire behind us, unfortunately. But really a conversation with him and with you. So the way we will do this is I'm going to ask him a few questions, and then we'll open this up for you all to dialogue with him. First of all, thank you. Salman has been, we've watched him. He's a humble man. What I find interesting in all of the folks who get involved with ventures like this is that as they advance in their chosen domains, their humility goes up. You would never say this, but today you're going to hear from a gentleman who hails from Pakistan, I'm proud to hail from Pakistan, who is in a very small stratosphere of senior executives with Fortune 50 companies. And we're absolutely delighted that you're part of this group and sharing some of your insights. So, kick us off. I'm very interested in the journeys, in the stories. So, if I could ask you to share your story with this group, Salman.
Right. So, thank you for the invitation. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I can dispense with this. So my story is probably very similar to many of your own stories.
People that are streaming will not be able to hear you.
Okay, here we go. So is that still working? Great. So as I was saying, my story is probably not that dissimilar to many of your own stories. I came to the United States, I was 17, and went to school in upstate New York, engineering. Moved to Chicago, actually worked in the Loop in the very early 80s on the Deep Tunnel project, and then went to business school at Northwestern. And literally, I was going to be a banker. And I got an interview letter, sort of a closed interview invitation to interview with P&G in my beginning of my second year at Kellogg. And I thought, gosh, this sounds good. It's before my banking interview, so I'll go interview with them as practice. For what's to come. And that was my only marketing interview. Everything else was set up for finance and banking, and as things would have it, they kept inviting me back. And the old saying, the path least traveled and least expected. And that's sort of how I ended up. All my job offers were in finance except one, and I took the one. I've never looked back since. I think it's been a terrific run. I worked for P&G for about a decade in Europe, in Cincinnati, in the Middle East. And then PepsiCo hired me from there, moved to New York. And then I was at PepsiCo for about 18 years in multiple roles, both in Dallas in the snacks business, in New York in the beverage business. My last role at PepsiCo was as the Global Chief Marketing Officer for the enterprise and the Global Chief Customer Officer. And then about 3.5 years ago, I met Fitz Johnson, whose family owns S.C. Johnson, and he asked me to come and be the CEO for North America and global about 2 years ago. So that's sort of, been my journey of the last 30-odd years. It's been fabulous. I grew up in Lahore, and I go back on average about once a year. And honestly, I feel very grateful. I feel lucky. Sometimes luck plays a role, being in the right place at the right time. And
by the way, that's humility.
And it's true. And it's been a great run. I've learned a lot. And what inspires me is the opportunity to keep learning. And if I can influence other young people, and share my experiences. And my experiences may not be relevant for everyone. But to the degree that there's any learnings I can pass on, and that's for people to accept or not, that's totally fine by me. And if it helps people, that would be great. Because, when I was starting my career in the early 80s, there was certainly from South Asia, whether you're Pakistani or Indian, there were very, very, very few role models in the United States and corporate America. Actually, there were virtually none. So the whole South Asian diaspora, if you will, has come a long way. We've all failed. I think I would be dissembling the truth if I said to you that I've not fallen flat on my face more than once. I think that's part of any journey that you undertake. And I think from my perspective, at least, you have to celebrate your failures as much as the other way around. And you have to sort of figure out what you screwed up, because almost certainly you screwed up something. So you have to look inwards and then figure out how is it that you sort of try not to make the same mistake twice, make a different mistake the next time. So that's effectively been what my journey has been, and continuing to. And as long as I can keep adding value, I feel great. It allows one to have the energy to wake up early in the morning and do what's needed to get the work done.
Thank you. So, S.C. Johnson, if I recall, called himself a family company, right? And very much a family company. And they are known not to go outside their family. So when they go outside their family to bring such a senior executive and they find a guy who hails from Lahore, how did that quite transpire?
It's a fabulous company. It's about 130 years old. It was founded in 1886 up in Racine. And we're still headquartered there. And I live downtown Chicago, but I drive up to Racine every morning. The trick is to be on the Kennedy before 6 a.m. It's really smooth sailing prior to 6 a.m. After 6:15, all bets are off. I actually met Fitz Johnson in Davos at the World Economic Forum. I was there from PepsiCo. He was there from SCJ, and we were both on a panel in Davos. And we got to talking. There were 4 or 5 of us on a panel. We started talking, a cup of coffee afterwards. One thing leads to the other, and a year later, sort of I moved. And so that's the story.
So that was too enlightening. You talked about falling flat on your feet a few times. Say more.
Well, I've made a career out of failing, actually. Every time that I've messed up, I've almost always traced it to one theme, at least for me, and that's the failure to listen and to understand the context. Because you believe that what's made you successful today, whether you're 5 years into your career, 15 years into your career, will continue to work for you as you move forward. And in my experience, at least, nothing could be further from the truth. Because the rules for operating are continuously changing, and as a result, there are no rules per se. There's no playbook. And if you're going to succeed, you're going to have to chart out a playbook that works for you. And in order to chart out that playbook, you're going to have to figure out what's the context in which you're operating in, who are your stakeholders, what's important to them. And I think this next point, at least for me, is really important because organizations have evolved from the way the classic organization was organized way back when was sort of like the military. You're the generals, and you're the brigadiers, and you're the colonels, and the majors, and the captains, and the orders got passed sort of down the chain of command. That's not how organizations, at least successful organizations, operate today, but yet many people make the mistake of believing that because you may have more stripes than the next person, all you have to do is tell people what to do. Make no mistake, we live in an era where the currency of our age is influence. And you have to be able to persuade people. PepsiCo, where I spent 18 years, is perhaps the most non-hierarchical conversation. It's all about influence. It doesn't matter if you're a colonel calling a major in a different country. If the strength of your idea doesn't persuade them, or if they feel that you're trying to do something for your own self-promotion, you will not win. And I think that's really important in our era, because even if you look at global politics, a big country can't just tell a small country what to do. You have to find ways to influence in a way that creates greater good for everyone. So for me, this whole idea of influencing, the whole idea of bringing people along, may take more time up front, but at the end, it leads generally to better shared outcomes for everyone.
Does your wife think you're a good listener?
Hell no.
Failed there.
No. That's been a 29-year journey of continuous failing.
It's a reality check for all of us, right? When we get home. Let's open this up. I want to be true to what I said. This is as much about you guys as us putting it together. Can we have a microphone runner bring microphones over? Hold your hand up, and one of our volunteers will bring a microphone to you. You're trying to capture this on video, so just bear with us 1 second and you do that. Thank you, Salman, for those comments and for unveiling at this intimate fireside chat. Let's see where the questions take us.
Well, we could just stand up and speak really loud, right?
No, it's fine. Let's just capture that.
Thank you for sharing your.
And please state your name and your organization before you ask.
Yes. Hi, Nassim Malik from MRA Global. I had a chance to briefly meet Salman. I'd be interested in your insights on the moves that you've made, right? So you've moved from blue chip companies to blue chip companies. So tell us a little bit about how they got you out, how Pepsi got you out of P&G. You talked a little bit about SCJ, but especially P&G, because you left at a time about 20 years ago when they were very much vaunted for almost lifelong employment, right? So I know a lot of P&G guys, and they were always very proud of the fact that our people don't leave, especially back then. So tell us a little bit about your career at P&G and then the Pepsi and now at SCJ.
Yeah, for me, my career, I mean, if I look back, and I think you're going to think that it's going to come across as it was much more thought through than it really was. It's sort of the benefit of hindsight. The one thing that was true for me was, can I keep growing in a given role in a given organization? And if the answer is yes, I'm adding value, and the organization and the role is adding value, and I continue to see that that's a yes and a yes, keep driving forward. When PepsiCo called me, it was for such an amazing it was not an incremental opportunity, it was a significantly broader remit. And for me, sort of when you do the pros and cons of a move, because every time you move, you have to rebuild your credit balance. You have to rebuild your reputation in the new company. Nothing carries over, nothing. So you have to really think that one through. And I'm sure everyone here has, you get tons of headhunter calls. The vast majority of them are straightforward no's. A very small group you'll even listen to, and even a smaller group would you even give serious consideration to. And so for me, that's why I've only worked for 3 organizations in 35 years. And that's because when you really think through the pros and cons, it's not clear to me what you gain by moving for the sake of moving. My goal, especially the first 15 or 20 years of my career, was to accumulate as broad a suite of experience as I could. As a result of that, I worked in Europe 3 times. I've lived in Germany. I was in Germany when the Berlin Wall came down. It was one of the most amazing experiences of my entire career, because you have to redo all your business models. I had to learn German in order to talk to German retailers, which I did. I worked in the UK, I was in Switzerland, I worked in the Middle East, Europe, spent a lot of my career in Japan and China and places like that. Because for me, the broader your experiences, because the world, everyone says it, Friedman talks about it, the world is incredibly small. And no matter how small your business, you are competing globally in some form or fashion. So the more I can learn and continue to learn what the rules are and how quickly they're changing. I was last week in Hangzhou with Alibaba guys and spent a day with them. And honestly, I walked out of there feeling like a neophyte all over again in terms of how quickly things are changing and what we're going to have to do as an organization to change to succeed. So these are some of the things that have characterized sort of what's inspired me the 2 times that I've moved.
Great. Hold your hand up.
Thank you for your comments. I really enjoyed some of the comments you made. I'm Iram Shah, and I've been in corporate world for 20 years, including PepsiCo in my early times. The question I have is around the role model. You mentioned role modeling, and I have worked in 5 different countries and 5 different companies, and I have not seen an increase in Pakistani in the senior management roles in corporate world. I've seen a lot of increase in other nationalities, but it's been either very slow or flat. Maybe it's because they're taking up different professions, maybe they're going more into medical, but I wanted to know your point of view and your kind of perception of, is that right, or I'm just being in companies that have been dominated by not so many Pakistanis in senior management roles?
Wow, that's a difficult question because I'm going to give, this is going to be not a scientific opinion at all. I think, there's more than we might think. Unlike our brethren across the border, Pakistanis don't tend to write about other Pakistanis.
Well said.
And if I could find a way to resolve that, I would love to have a silver bullet that sort of says, look, can you not understand that, this person here, this person here, this person here. I mean, there are today number of success stories, some of which are here, some of which are in other parts of the United States. We just don't do a good enough job of talking about it or celebrating success per se. I wish I could put my finger on, anything I say would be so personal, sort of it's almost irrelevant to the vast majority of people. But if you look at how, and I've said this to a lot of my Indian friends, they do a fabulous job of talking about folks from India who've done remarkably well in all sorts of enterprises in the United States. And honestly, that's a fabulous thing to do. We don't. And I wish I could tell you why we don't. But putting that aside, there's been a number of people who've run big pharmaceutical companies in the US, and so on, and hardly anyone knows about them. And, go figure.
True, and I think as we get more questions, that's one of the promises and potentials of a platform like Open, right? That, how many of you even knew about Salman Amin before today? So, it's to, a few hands have gone up, he's right here in Chicago, but there is really no platform for that conversation, and hence this. So let's go ahead to hold your hands up.
Yeah, this is a very maybe a redundant question. It's not.
Please introduce yourself.
It is. I'm Dr. Tajuddin Ahmed. I'm a cardiologist by profession. I was struck by a lot of your conversation. It was very encouraging to listen to. But one thing that you said that you always fail if you don't listen to people. So I really want to know what is the secret of Donald Trump, who doesn't listen to anybody.
I was waiting for that. That's a risk of doing a conference 3 days before a divisive election. So there you go.
I think the people he speaks to the people who want to listen to him.
Excellent. I love the hands going up. Keep this coming.
Hi, my name is Tarek Laliwala, representing Merrill Lynch. Just want to follow up on a quick comment that Iram made about the Indian Americans. There's a gala coming up next week where you probably know Harit Talwar is being awarded American India Foundation. If you want to see the success of the Indian executive, that's the place to be. That's how they support everybody. But the question I have for you, Mr. Amin, is you mentioned briefly about your challenges that you came 30 years ago or so. I am pretty confident the number of individuals, whether they're Indian, Pakistani, Muslim Americans, they are facing pretty similar challenges when they're coming from overseas or they're just graduating recently from the colleges. In your opinion, what do you think? What kind of an infrastructure do we need in the corporate America just to mentor or just to bring these young folks on board or just even talk to them to see basic skill set on how to improve and whatnot? Thank you.
I'll take your question in two parts. One is the question of the relationship between a mentor and a mentee. And the second one is what I would advise a 24, 25-year-old. I have two kids, one's 23, one's 27. For the record, they do not listen to me.
I thought I was doing something wrong with our kids.
The relationship, mentoring is really, really hard. And I've experimented with multiple types of programs in my career, and every time you make this a formal relationship, it almost always fails in virtually every company because it comes across as forced. And if you can't find a human link between a mentor and a mentee, they don't have enough in common, it becomes a transactional relationship. And it's very hard to build constructive mentor-mentee relationships when it's highly transactional, because everyone's really, really busy. And there's a bit of, so do I want to spend an hour a month or an hour a quarter with you when in the moment I'm so rushed? So it tends to fall down. For people coming from South Asia, and I think we are too rigid in how we educate young people to this day. The liberal arts is not celebrated. And honestly, when I'm hiring people, I'm looking for people who've had a very broad liberal arts education because I want thinkers. I want some of the questions I tell our folks to ask at Kellogg and Wharton and all these places we go to is ask them what's the last book they read. Yet kids from Pakistan want to talk about their GPA. By the time you're in a good school, I take your GPA for granted. It doesn't matter to me if you're 3.2 or 3.9. Honestly, it does not matter to me. I'm interested much more in who you are as a person. How broad are you? How resilient are you? How much emotional maturity do you have? Talk to me about your failures, which brings me to the second thing. We never teach our young people to talk about when they failed. We gloss over it because it becomes a taboo subject. And it's wrong, because the world today, you need people who understand what it's like not to succeed. Because we've become so academic. When I was growing up in Pakistan, Dr. Salman, you were either an engineer or a doctor, maybe a lawyer, right? Sort of, kind of. I'm exaggerating a bit, but that's largely what people were told. I wasn't smart enough to be a doctor, so I became an engineer. Honestly, it's that simple. I worked as an engineer for 2 years, and I knew it wasn't for me, right? But I was able to confront that, look at myself in the mirror and say, you know what? I don't think this is really your passion. So business school for me was a fabulous way of really exploring alternative channels and then figuring out, and even then, as I said to you, by the time I went to my second year, I thought I was going to go into finance, and I ended up having a 30-plus year career largely in CPG, consumer products marketing. So I think we become too rigid, our young people too early. They want specific jobs. They don't want a track that teaches them how to learn. When I tell a young person, go ahead, come on board and join the company, and I'll send you, go work on the Walmart team in Bentonville, Arkansas, and learn how to sell, they look at you like, no way. I went to this school, my parents would be aghast. There's just no way I'll do it. I want to work in New York and Chicago and LA. And I'm like, well, you know what? You're not thinking the right way. You're not building a career. Because for me, a career is a marathon. It's not a 100-meter sprint. And you have to think about it and build it as if it's 26.2 miles of running. Now, you can't plot for every mile that you get to, but at least think about how you want to feel at the 5-mile mark, at the 10-mile mark. And that's how you have to think about it. And there are points where you'll slow down and points at which you'll accelerate. And you have to be able to accept both.
Before we get the next question, one of our initiatives within Open, one of the things I say to our charter members coming on board is there is an expectation that they will serve as a mentor to at least one mentee. And we're actually in the throes of formalizing that process. And you'll hear more about this. I think early 2017 we will launch exactly that, because that is a need. There is a huge need. And as busy as our successful entrepreneurs and corporate leaders are, the only way to shift that is to make that sacrifice So stay tuned on that, please.
If I ask you 2 questions, I'm Junaid, and that was great. But we're in a supply chain business, and one question I have is in my life, being in a supply chain business, I've always struggled with finding the right passion. How did you find your passion? That's first question. The second question is change is important. If you don't change, you're dying. And being in a supply chain, again, we serve P&G, we serve Walmarts, we serve you today. And I'm inquisitive to know what is being changed when it comes to the internet strategy for your company, for P&G. Just like Amazon just started the delivery grocery places. So from your comments, what is being changed today?
Right, so I'll take your first question first. What I love about what I do is every Monday morning I get a report card. Actually, it's late Sunday night. And it's the sales report for the prior week. And honestly, I get 52 of those a year. And I know exactly how I'm doing. I don't have to pretend. No one has to tell me if I'm doing a good job or a bad job or an in-between job. And that's 52 times a year, it's like a report card. So I love that. Because you can come up with all the fancy plans in the ivory towers, but if consumers in a Kroger or in a Jewel or whichever is your favorite grocery store don't walk up to a shelf and choose you in preference to some other brand, you've lost, right? And so for me, what I do, and given it is the election season, in some ways, I participate in the greatest democracy on earth because consumers are voting, in our cases, almost 1 billion times a day around the world. We have almost 1 billion transactions a day around the world. And when you think of it that way, in the average transaction, whichever currency you use it, let's say $2. So I'm asking them to take $2 out 1 billion times a day, give or take, and, vote in one of my brand's favor. So that's my passion. I love to see, and I hate to lose, by the way. So if you are, I don't need my boss to tell me you're doing a terrible job. I know it. Sunday night, around 9:30 at night, the report comes in, and I have all night, if I so choose, to look at it and either get mad or smile. 52 times a year. So that's what I love, is this ability to see how you're doing and whether the things you're doing have an impact in the marketplace. And if I can understand that I'm having an impact in the marketplace, that's what drives me. To your second question, boy, that's hard. I don't think anyone has the playbook on how that's changing. I mean, I'll divide your question again in 2 parts. There's the media side of it, which is social search, mobile, etc. Virtually every company has changed its mix. We have too. Over the last 2 years, we've built a lot of relationships with everyone from Facebook to Google to Instagram to Pinterest and so on. I see those folks all the time. The bigger challenge, I think, and you mentioned Amazon, is how will we participate in the e-commerce world? We're doing very, very well. Our growth rates are terrific, but I just don't know how high is high. They're terrific compared to the bricks and mortar business. But I don't know if they should be double the size they actually are. And understanding consumer behavior, what the consumer experience is something we're going to have to learn our way through. So we're investing ahead of the curve. And I'm investing in an expectation that the business grow from X to Y in the next 3 years and staffing accordingly. We've got multiple business models we are playing with right now. We have a different business model in the US. I was in China just last few days, different business model in China. I have a third business model we're playing with in the UK. And we'll have to figure this out. And I think the only thing we could get wrong is if you're not agile enough and not prepared to accept that one of these models may well be the wrong model. I spent the day with Alibaba in Hangzhou a few days ago, and when I listened to how they're managing data, and we spent quite a bit of time understanding that, and their ability to transact and to understand who they're transacting with across all of their platforms. We're not where we should be as an industry yet.
Thanks.
So we could probably listen to Salman all morning. Hasn't he been wonderful? We'll probably take one or two questions depending on, by the way, the questions are fantastic. And that also is a testimony to you all. And you're asking really deep and challenging questions. So, well, I don't know who had his hands up. I'll let Ali decide. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Irshad Hussain. I'm a fourth year undergraduate business student at Illinois Tech. I'm originally from Pakistan, Pakistan. I'm really impressed today, and I'm very fortunate to listen to your story. And I just want to ask a simple question there. What are like some critical skills students should have, or the approaches students should have to be as successful as you?
Well, I hope you're far more successful than me in your career. Your academics will take care of itself. You do well, I'm positive of it. I would urge you to think of a few things. One, be articulate. Learn how to define the problems you're trying to solve. I would urge you to read widely. Read great literature. Read books on business. No one book will ever be the perfect book, but read as much as you can and extract what you can for a given point in your career. As you go into work, you're going to have bosses you like, and you'll have bosses you don't care for. And you're going to have to deal equally successfully with both kinds. And the one thing I would urge you is, no matter who is your boss, whether you love them or you hate them, try to learn one thing from each of your bosses. Because the fact that you're reporting to someone means they must know something that you don't, or that you can take away from them. That will make that experience less frustrating for you. And you will have both, I will guarantee you that. Be resilient. Don't worry about failing. In fact, it's hard to grow without failing. Many people have written about it. I've sort of made an art of it. You're going to have to learn how to pick yourself up and surround yourself with people who don't judge you.
Assalamualaikum. As we are talking about building companies, and I'm also associated with Luminous Tech, working with Faiz. We are an IT-based company, a startup. How do we balance our life? We're building all these corporations and accumulated all this money and serving on all these boards. How do we balance our life with our children and our spouses, so our kids, they don't get lost and they kind of listen to us? Even if they don't listen to us, they don't get lost, and they are also successful as human beings and also as successful person.
I don't know if there's a simple way of doing that. I would like to think that on average, I've done okay by my kids. I'm not sure I can point to any sustained period of time when I've struck the perfect balance, too much or too little. And that's sort of like the honest truth. And a number of people ask me, how do you strike the right balance? And I think that balance is up to you. How you feel about what you should dedicate your time to at what point in your life is such a personal decision. That's hard for me to give you advice. I do think that there is no such thing as the perfect balance. It's a combination of what you think you need to do at home. It's a combination of what your children need, your ambition, your inspiration, your partnership with your partner or spouse. What do you both want for your family? How do you define success for your family together? For better or worse, I've moved 10 times in my career. right? And I can't begin to tell you that all 10 were smart or wise moves. They weren't, right? Probably the majority were, but all 10 were not. And that's just through a lot of very honest dialogue with your spouse or partner. It sort of kind of worked out for us. As I said a little while ago, luck plays a role. Gosh, I wish I could define what perfection is. I don't know if it exists.
I think we're all struggling with that, and varying degrees of success at best. Perhaps the last question.
My name is Faizan Kai. I'm a co-founder of a software startup called Busy. We've been talking a lot about your successes, but when you were talking through the Fireside chat, you were sharing some of the most failures that you've had flat on your face. What are some of those failures, and what did you do to overcome those? And I guess what were some of your most influential failures, and how did you overcome those?
You know, as I said, for me, every time, and there have been 3 or 4 spectacular failures in my career, almost all of them were because I thought I knew the answer better than someone else's, and I jumped. I was incredibly reactive, and I was not particularly patient, and I had prejudged the outcomes. And that's a mistake, right? And they've happened sort of, thank God, most of them were relatively early in my career, but so what I've learned about myself is to try to become better at self-reflecting and really think about, I'm blessed with, or some people would say cursed with, a 1 hour, 5-minute drive to work every morning to receive. I use that time to think about what I'm likely to face that day. And I try, not always succeed, I try to remind myself, do not react, especially if I know there'll be a couple of difficult conversations during the day or there's some big decisions coming up. The tendency is to lose patience with people. And if I can, and this is me for me, if I can manage that successfully, more often than not, I'll manage the outcomes well. It's when I sort of kind of just don't do that well or don't think it through before what I'm going to be faced with. And I don't think about it. And that's been the issue. And the way I overcome it is try to be more and more self-reflective and understand who I am. Look, at this point, I'm not going to change a whole lot. What I can do is manage my strengths and opportunities in a way that sort of works for the people around me. There's no success I've had in many, many years that's attributed to me. 0. Every success that I've been a part of is because I've surrounded myself with people. And I do this consciously, who are smarter than I am, who know a given subject better than I do. All I can do is to make sure I'm asking the right question and then trust them to go find the answer. And if I can do that for a sustained enough period of time and not try to be the smartest person in the room, on average, I think I'll be fine. The company will be fine. Because I'm there to add value to the enterprise at the end of the day.
Could perhaps take one more.
Can you say?
Salman Akif from Washington, D.C. Wonderful to see such a good group here in Chicago. You were a Kellogg graduate. You built a career in marketing from 3 exceptional companies and brands that are recognized across the world. Marketing is going through a massive transformation. It has been for some time now. You've been a part of that trend. You rode that and you've innovated. As you look back to the business school community, you've been to Kellogg as an alum. Where is that training sector on this discipline? Are they behind? What trends do you see forthcoming that they have to grab onto so younger people can actually be in the right spot? I know my brother's launched a successful data analytics company over there in consumer marketing. I look at what he's doing, and I look at what is being taught in classes, it's quite wide off. So what is your perspective on that, and what's your advice to those going into business school?
Yeah, great question. So I have this chat with the folks at Kellogg quite frequently. For those of you who teach, faculty are free agents, and they always decide what they want to study. I think there are 2 things that are critical today. They may not be 5 years from now. That's the beauty of it. One is power shifted from brand owners to retailers starting about 15 years ago. It started shifting. And that has only gained speed over this period of time. And they have a choice on what to stock in their store and not to stock in their store. And a number of companies never recognized that early enough. And finding that win-win on how to manage through that. You know, Walmart is a $400 billion enterprise annually, right? About 300 of that is in the United States, about 100 of that is outside the United States. You have to convince them that what you're talking about makes sense and they'll make enough money off the times you're going to rotate off the shelf. So that's one big shift. The other one is what someone was asking me earlier about the role of digital. Because increasingly what's happening is the rules of competing through an Amazon or an Alibaba or a JD.com and these people is different. Consumers are no longer walking into a store. They go to the first page. And either it's a replenishment strategy, the site tells you you bought this last time, you want to order it again, and 8 times out of 10 people will just check the same box. So if you're a new company coming up, how do you get on the first page? It fundamentally shifts what marketing is and how do you quote display your product. Brands were designed with big faces, with very colorful graphics. What difference does that make on a web page? How will you talk about the brand proposition when you're dealing on the web or on the internet? It fundamentally shifts what a brand proposition has to be. And we have to learn how to make that happen.
We'll have to leave it at this. Was this a good conversation? There's a reason I pushed hard to get Salman here, because I think this showcases what we are wanting to do. And these conversations are not easy. They have a risk at times of becoming self-congratulatory. But Salman, I don't know how, has managed to sort of do the right balance by speaking the truth about his experience and his career, but doing it in such a remarkable way that I was sitting and thinking one of the sort of principles of our design for this entire conference has been a sort of a three-step approach, that each of the segments have to give learning, have to inspire, and thirdly have to engage. I think we hit a trifecta on this first one, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.